Want to learn Italian but wondering if Italian is a difficult language to learn? Well, the verdict is in. And in this video we'll look at why Italian can be easy, plus 9 misconceptions about learning Italian that are holding you back. Then I'll give you my top 5 language resources for learning Italian in record time. Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm the Intrepid Guide, your guide to language learning for travel. And if you're new to my channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button, click on the bell notification so you get an alert when I post more videos like this one. Andiamo, let's go! When I first started learning Italian back in 2006, I came across a few linguistic quirks that I'd never seen before. Now, whilst learning Italian isn't the most difficult language out there, there is definitely a small collection of common pitfalls that English-speaking students tend to struggle with, myself included. So, is Italian hard to learn? Well, what does hard really mean? The feeling of a language being hard is very subjective and depends a lot on your mother tongue, other foreign languages that you may already know, and what proficiency you want to achieve in the language. So how long it takes to get fluent depends on several factors, and according to the Foreign Service Institute, or the FSI, there are 4 groups of languages based on their difficulty for English speakers. They have also calculated how long it takes to reach a minimum professional proficiency, which is the equivalent of ILR 3 or C1, using the Common European Framework. Now, which category does Italian fall into? Well, the good news for English speakers is that Italian falls into Group 1, which is essentially the easiest group, which means you only need to spend between 24 to 30 weeks or 600 or 750 class hours to reach such an advanced level. And to find out more about how long it takes to get fluent, check out my link in the description below where you can watch a video where I talk exactly about how long it takes. Since Italian is a Romance language, if you have some knowledge of other Romance languages such as Spanish, Portuguese or French, it can make learning Italian a bit easier. These so-called related languages that belong to the same group quite often have a lot of shared vocabulary, and their grammatical structures are very similar as well. For an English speaker, Italian is relatively easy to learn compared to, say, with Russian or Japanese. Let's take a look at 4 reasons why learning Italian can be easy. The first reason is that Italian is a phonetic language, which means that it sounds more or less like it is written, and all of the syllables are pronounced. Now, this makes a language easier in terms of identifying what is being said, since you can easily identify the words being spoken. Whereas in French or Portuguese, it tends to be a bit trickier since the words don't always look the way that they would expect them to be said, and vice versa. The second reason is that you already know some Italian. Now, you may not realize it yet, but you already know a lot of Italian words, and you'd be surprised by just how many Italian words look and sound familiar to English. In fact, there are a few thousand words which, when modified slightly in spelling and pronunciation, will give you the same word and definition in Italian. Now, that alone should set your mind at ease. It may also come as a surprise to know that an active vocabulary ranges between 500 and 1500 words, not thousands. And a study showed that a full-length New York Times article used on average 600 unique words. So it just means that you don't need to learn a lot of words to start speaking Italian. Number 3 is that Italian has a ton of English loanwords. Now, although Italians are very proud of their language, they have allowed some English words to creep in here and there. Now, generally they are pronounced the same way as in English, just with a couple of exceptions. They say, for example, words such as gadgets, jogging, feeling, and shock. You'll even hear them use the word okay, which sounds more like okay. Now, since Italian doesn't have a word for privacy, they use the English word instead, and it sounds something like privacy. It's no wonder then that the Italians were the first paparazzi and the ones who actually invented the term. And ever since computers have entered our lives, Italians will say things like cliccare sul mouse, which means to click on the mouse. And finally, there's lo zapping, which means changing the channels with the remote control. And here is a list of words that you may recognize. You've got la radio, l'autobus, l'antenna, l'hotel, l'aria, l'idea, l'hamburger, il cocktail, il jazz, il cinema, il computer, il bar, il blues, il film, il rock and roll, il weekend, il camping, i jeans, lo snob, lo shock, lo shopping, lo sport, lo shampoo, lo zoo. Now this is just a short list of English words that have entered the Italian language. And in the same way, many Italian words are used in English-speaking countries as well, including la pizza, la pasta, gli spaghetti, I tortellini, la mozzarella, l'espresso, il cappuccino, il panino, I panini, I biscotti, il biscotto, il tiramisu. So you can see there's a bit of a trend here that everything seems to be food related, and there's good reason for that. Incidentally, did you know that the word tiramisu literally means pull me up or pick me up? And this refers to the fact that this sweet dessert is made with strong Italian espresso coffee, effectively giving you an energy boost after a heavy meal. Now, if all of this talk about Italian food has made you hungry, check out my guide How to Order Food and Drink in Italian, which I've linked to in the description below. In addition to the words that have crept into the language directly, Italian and English have many cognates. Now, a cognate is a word in one language that has the same origin as a word in another and may sound similar. So here are a few examples. L'aeroporto for airport, l'attenzione, attention, la comunicazione for communication, l'importante for important, l'incredibile, the incredible. As I mentioned earlier, Italian has its quirks, so let's take a look at the Italian grammar and see how it works. Like other Romance languages, Italian uses grammatical gender, even for inanimate nouns. Now, Italian nouns are either masculine or feminine, and now this is purely a grammatical category that doesn't depend on the physical characteristics of the objects. Now, the gender of a noun is important to remember because it influences the parts of speech that agree with the noun, including articles, adjectives, and sometimes verbs. So let's take a look at an example. Il gatto nero, so for the black cat, or la porta nera, the black door. So you can see that the masculine ends in an O and the feminine ends in an A. The next one is pronunciation. Now, Italian pronunciation is quite logical and regular, with very few exceptions. It is phonetic, which we touched on earlier, meaning the words are read pretty much just as they are written, and all the syllables are pronounced. This makes listening comprehension relatively easy to master. Learning to speak Italian may be a little bit harder, as there are some sounds in Italian that are slightly different from English. For instance, they roll their R's. Here are a few words that you can read quite easily in Italian, even if you haven't learned the pronunciation rules just yet. There's poeta for poet, problema for problem, senso for sense, finale for final, and melodia for melody. Next up, we have articles. Now, articles in Italian are a bit different from the ones in English, as they inflect much more. Like English, Italian has indefinite and definite articles, but they inflect according to the gender and number of the noun and are also affected by the first letter of the word that follows them. So here are a few examples. We have una candela, un'arancia, un momento, il pollo, I polli, l'ombrello, gli ombrelli, lo studente, gli studenti, la zuppa, le zuppe, l'ora, le ore. Next up, we have prepositions, and prepositions are one of the trickiest parts of speech to learn in any language. And there seems to be very little logic behind their use, and they mostly have to be memorized if you want to learn to use them correctly. One of the trickier things about Italian prepositions is that when used with articles, they are blended together to make dozens of new forms. For example, to say in Italian, there could be up to 7 different variations according to their number and gender. So this is what it looks like. In and il become nel, in and l apostrophe becomes nel, in and lo becomes nello, in and la becomes nella, in and I becomes ne, and in and gli become negli, in and le become nelle. The same thing is true for saying to the, which are a and il become al, a and lo become ello, a and l apostrophe becomes al, a and la become alla, a and I become I, a and li become agli, a and le become alle. So as you can see, Italian prepositions are among the most complicated of all Romance languages. Next up, we have nouns. Now, as mentioned earlier, Italian nouns have a category of grammatical gender that doesn't exist in English. And each Italian noun is either masculine or feminine. In some animate nouns, the grammatical gender matches the actual one. For example, la madre is mother, which is feminine, and il padre, which means father and is masculine. Now, the ending of a noun can indicate its gender. For example, nouns ending in a are usually feminine, like la mela, and nouns ending in o are usually masculine, such as il vaso for the vase. Of course, there are exceptions, such as il problema, the problem, which is masculine, and la mano, which is the hand but is feminine. Noun endings in e can be both feminine and masculine, such as il ponte, the bridge, and la notte, the night. Now let's take a look at adjectives. In Italian, adjectives are normally placed after the nouns they modify, and they agree with the noun in gender and number, which leads to many more adjective forms than there are in English. Let's take a look at the word red, which is rosso. We have il libro rosso, I libri rossi, la ciliegia rossa, and le ciliegie rosse. Next up, let's take a look at Italian verbs or verb conjugation. Now, Italian verbs have a very high degree of inflection and change according to the mood, person, tense, number, aspect, and gender. And based on the ending of the infinitive form of the verb, Italian verbs are divided into 3 distinct conjugation patterns or verb families. And these verb families are are, ire, ere. However, there are also verbs that don't follow these patterns at all, and they are considered irregular verbs. Because of all this, mastering the Italian verb conjugation system is not necessarily hard, but it definitely is time consuming because of the sheer number of forms that are available to you. For instance, the verb to love in English has just 3 forms: love, loving, and loved. Compare this with Italian. We have amo, ami, ama, amiamo, amate, amano, amavo, amavi, amava, amavamo, amavate, amavano. And that's not even half of the possible forms. And to find out more how to conjugate verbs in Italian, you can click on the link in the description below where I've created a video specifically about how to do that. Next up, we have the subjunctive tense. Now, one of the most difficult tenses in Italian is the congiuntivo, or the subjunctive tense. Now, the subjunctive tense is used to express opinion, possibility, desire, or doubt. Now, even Italians themselves occasionally make mistakes when they use the subjunctive tense. Now, compare these 2 phrases with the verb avere, which means to have. So you can say you are right, as in you're correct. You would say ha ragione. You can also say I think you're right, which means credo che tu abbia ragione, like I think that you are right. The subjunctive tense is used a lot in Italian. However, sometimes you can avoid it. For instance, instead of saying credo che, which means I think that, you can say secondo me or per me, which means in my opinion. So to say I think you're right, you can say secondo me hai ragione. Here are a few examples of the subjunctive forms using the verb piovere, which means to rain, after the verb sperare, meaning to hope, followed by che, which means that. So we have speriamo che domani non piova, which means let's hope that it won't rain tomorrow. Speriamo che non abbia piovuto a Roma. Let's hope that it hasn't rained in Rome. Speravamo che non piovesse. We hoped that it wouldn't rain. Speravamo che non avesse piovuto. We hoped it hadn't rained. So now that you have a general idea of how Italian grammar works, let's dispel those 9 common misconceptions about learning Italian that are probably holding you back. You might be thinking, Italian is harder to learn than English. Well, some research suggests that Italian is actually easier than English. So why can it feel so hard? It may be because you are used to speaking English fluently as your native language. Learning anything new feels challenging at the start, since the learning curve is always really steep. Now, this is absolutely natural, but once you reach a certain level, things do get easier. Remember, we were all beginners once. Another thing you might be thinking is, I won't be able to roll my R's. Now, you may be surprised to find out that not all Italians can roll their R's either. There are quite a few regional dialects that use la R moscia, which is the soft R. But if you do want to roll your R's but are still struggling with it, try repeating the English words ladder or butter quickly a few times. And if that doesn't help, there are dozens of YouTube videos that can give you detailed instructions. You may also be thinking, but there are no Italian schools where I live. Well, who needs a school in this age of digital technology? Nowadays, there are many great ways to learn and practice Italian online. You can take an online course like my Intrepid Italian course, find a highly qualified Italian teacher on italki, listen to a podcast, watch videos like mine on YouTube, or chat with people on language exchange platforms. There are so many different options available to you. The internet is a vast learning resource, so don't be afraid to make the most of it. For more tips, check out my guide to my favourite language learning resources to help get you started, and I'll link to this in the description below. You may also think, but I won't use Italian in the future. Well, no matter why you started learning Italian, new exciting opportunities for using the language can and probably will come up in the future. Maybe a new job opportunity will present itself, or you'll have better travel experiences. You can make Italian speaking friends, or you can enjoy Italian movies on TV shows, and you can even read Italian literature in the original language. One thing that comes up a lot is that I'm too old to learn Italian. Well, no one is too old to learn a new language, including Italian. Now, I didn't start until I was an adult. Now, this is so important and it's worth repeating. You are not too old to learn a new language. Now, while it is true that children's brains are more flexible and better at absorbing new things, adults often have more motivation and dedication to learning and are better at analysing what they learn. So actually, you have the upper hand, not children. No matter how old you are, you can learn Italian. So stop making excuses and just get started. You might be thinking, no one I know speaks Italian, I won't be able to practice. Well, depending on where you live, you can probably find a variety of events dedicated to Italian in your local area, such as language club meetups or events organised by the Italian embassy, movie screenings or film festivals, wine tasting, or there's Italian restaurants that you can go to as well. The internet can also be a great alternative to in-person events. Platforms such as italki are my personal favourite because I can choose either to book a lesson with a qualified teacher or just a conversation session with a native speaker. Now, finding someone to practice with has never been easier, plus it's a great way to make new friends and learn more about the Italian culture. What about natives won't be able to understand me? Now, Italians are actually very friendly and welcoming towards anyone trying to speak their language. They're very forgiving and don't mind you butchering the pronunciation or making grammar mistakes. Do your best to speak to the best of your abilities, but don't overthink every word and you'll be fine. Now, talking to native speakers is a great way to practice Italian, and the more you do it, the better you'll become, and the more fun it will be. You could be thinking, I'm only going on a short trip to Italy, so why bother? Well, even on a short trip, some knowledge of the local language will come in handy. You can chat with the locals, order your meal in Italian, ask for recommendations, get off the beaten path and discover new hidden gems. And with my course, Intrepid Italian, you can become conversational in Italian with my 80-20 method in just 2 weeks. Or maybe you're thinking, learning Italian requires a textbook and I don't like them. Well, thankfully, the years of having to use just one textbook and having to use it all the time, even if you hate it, are long gone. There is a vast variety of resources available nowadays, and you can choose whatever works for you based on your learner type. Now, you can take an online course, you can listen to podcasts like Coffee Break Italian, use my favourite language learning app like Monly, or chat with native speakers on italki. The list goes on. It is important that you find a resource that fits best for you and your learner type. It will make the learning process easier, more fun, and more effective. And to find out what type of language learner you are, watch my video, which I've linked to in the description below this video. So why do you want to learn Italian? Think about your why and let this be your motivation to keep you going for when the road gets rough. Is it because you simply want to learn it for the sake of it? Fantastico! Is it because it sounds beautiful and it gives you a sexy accent? Bravo! Do you have a trip coming up to Italy in the coming weeks and you don't want to fall into the tourist traps and you want to have an authentic experience? Perfecto! Once you know your why, everything becomes easier. When you are passionate about learning, you'll enjoy the challenges because you'll know that they're helping you to grow and achieve your goals and to get closer to fluency if that's your ultimate goal. So, is Italian hard to learn? Not at all. It is actually one of the easiest languages for English speakers to learn. You may come across some difficulties, for instance, the grammatical aspects mentioned earlier, which are prone to causing difficulties for especially English learners. However, with a bit of practice, patience, you can easily overcome these difficulties and master la bella lingua, the beautiful language. My tip, start speaking Italian from the very beginning. Don't wait too long to start speaking Italian, even if you're just a beginner. Speaking is great for practicing the language material you have already learned, but it also helps you understand your weaknesses and what you need to focus on. Through speaking comes a lot of enjoyment and a wonderful sense of achievement. So even if you know just a handful of words in Italian, you can start speaking, so do it. Here are a couple of helpful tips to keep in mind. Now start with simple phrases and topics, even if you are just greeting someone in Italian. Be creative with the words that you already know. Get some help and feedback from a good teacher because this can go a really long way. Making mistakes is accepted and expected. And don't be too hard on yourself. Language learning is fun if you're kind to yourself. So how do you learn Italian? What is the best way to get started? Well, by having fun, of course. Now, Winston Churchill said it best. Personally, I'm always ready to learn, although I do not always like being taught. Here are 5 ways to get started learning Italian today. Join an online language course, and you can join my course, Intrepid Italian, to get started. You can go on a language holiday like I did, where you study abroad in a language school and you make a holiday out of it. You can use a language learning app like Monly to mix things up and keep you motivated. Or you can listen to a podcast like Coffee Break Italian, which is really popular. Or you can book your first lesson on italki and start practicing. Now, for a quick guide, I've linked to all of these resources in the description below, so make sure you check those out. So, are you learning Italian or do you plan on starting? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're serious about improving your target language, any of them, including Italian, download my free guide, 9 reasons you're not fluent yet and how to fix it. Just click on the link in the description below and I'll send you my free guide. In the meantime, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel and turn on those notifications so you get an alert when I post more videos like this one in the future. Until next time, thanks for watching and happy language learning. Ciao!